Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But for those of us that are familiar with these videos, you might have noticed that there's a bit of a change of scenery. I just moved into my new house, so this is the first video that I'm filming here. I have everything jimmy rigged and ready to collapse at any second. So I will be making some changes to the way that I have this set up in the future, but this is going to have to do for now. And yes, there are some gaps on the shelf behind me. It's very not cluttered and quite shameful to say the least, but I'm still actively unpacking. I'm hoping to get all that filled in for next week so we can have proper representation on this channel. But I do want to start this video a little bit differently than usual because I normally go over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week. But since I was at the Level Up retreat and then as soon as I got back I had to pack up and move here, I haven't had a whole lot of time to stay on top of all the new announcements. So there's not really anything new I have to mention. But what I do have to mention is a million times better than any upcoming campaign because I want to let you know of a few of the people that I met at the Level Up retreat. This was hands down the best and most fun convention that I've ever been to, and although I did get a little bit of special treatment, I'd still be saying the exact same thing if that wasn't the case because all the people there just made this so much fun and everyone was super kind and welcoming. Got to play a ton of games, many games that I really wanted to try out and many games that I now want to buy. And if I were to just quickly describe the experience that this convention was for me, I would describe it as eye-opening because this was unlike any other convention that I've been to. There wasn't any booths there set up just to sell you things. There wasn't anything unrelated to board games at this convention. Everything was focused on the board games and everything was focused on the people in the community and just being yourself and having a ton of fun together. When the average person hears the term board game convention, they typically think 40 to 50-year-old introverts, predominantly male, and for a time that may have been the case, but that is nothing like what the experience was at the Level Up retreat. There was quite a diverse crowd and everyone was super talkative, super funny, and it seemed like everyone was a comedian. Many of them actually were. But everyone there was really cool and I couldn't have had a better time, and they did take feedback from all the people that went as well, and they're going to be making even more improvements for the convention in the future, so I do highly recommend trying to make it out to this one if you ever get the opportunity. Every single person I got to hang out with just made my stay there that much better, and I do want to mention a few of them just as a quick thank you. A lot of the people I met are not involved in the board game industry in any way. They're just there to have fun and play some games, and thank you for everyone that falls into that category. I'm not going to be mentioning everyone here. I'm actually only going to be mentioning the content creators because I know they're already comfortable with their name being mentioned online. And they do also come with the added bonus that a lot of these creators you might already be familiar with, and it's just fun to hear their names show up on other channels. And my first mention here has to be Jenna from the Board Game Garden. A little bit of background here, Jenna and I actually live fairly close together, so we ended up traveling to the convention together, and traveling with Jenna just made that whole experience way more fun. She's super kind, super funny, and puts out some great content. She even put out a vlog wrapping up most of the retreat if you want to check it out. And if you're interested to know what I'm like out in the wild, I do make a few appearances. And as I was at the convention just trying to hang out with as many people as I possibly could, I did start to notice a little bit of a trend of people expressing their excitement at the opportunity to meet both Amy and Maggie at the convention, and it was totally well deserved, and I couldn't have been happier to be one of the many that actually got to hang out with them and actually play a few games. The personality that they have on the channel is very true to how they are in person, along with all that witty banter, and I just want to thank them for putting up with me as long as they had to and answering every single one of my endless barrage of questions about Australia and what it's like to live there. They left a really positive impression on me, and I'm sure I left at least a 60% positive impression on them. And despite being a content creator, I am absolutely terrible when it comes to social media. I will play a ton of games and never take a single picture, and sometimes I do take pictures and still forget to share them on Instagram. But someone who is really good at this stuff is Carley from Boardgames, where she posts all sorts of board game content on her Instagram, and she actually just started a YouTube channel as well. I'll be linking to all these content creators in the description below. But if you want to see some awesome content while also helping them out, I highly recommend that you check out their videos and subscribe if you like their content. And probably because of my lack of presence on Instagram, Carley was a new content creator to me, so I just met her at the convention. But every time I ran into her, she always had a smile, and there was always laughs wherever she was going. She was an absolute pleasure to chat with, and she did also post up her own vlog going over the Level Up retreat as well, so if you do want to see it from a different perspective, you can check out her content, which I'll have linked in the description below. And yes, I did get to play a few head-to-head games during the retreat, and for whatever reason, every time I found myself playing one of these games, I was always going up against Bryan Greer. Maybe it's because he was just so good at roasting me every time I was losing, so I just had to redeem myself, but had the pleasure of playing quite a few games with Bryan. He pretty much destroyed me in every single game, but I did get to sneak in a win on our final game and get the last laugh. Really enjoyed my games with Bryan, and despite all the roasting going on, he's actually a pretty chill guy. Really hope to see him again, and you should definitely check him out. Game Brigade, and I'll link him down below. And like I said, it was quite a diverse crowd at the Level Up retreat, and somehow I found myself at a table playing games with the 3 comedians that happened to be there, which were Tim Riel, Grant Lyon, and Jeff Kornberg from the Dragon's Tome. And I'm just gonna wrap all 3 of these together because all 3 of these guys are hilarious, and I was doing my best to keep up with them as they were just cracking jokes left, right, and center. But these 3 guys also have their own content that you definitely want to be checking out. Tim Riel has Codenames Live, where he has all sorts of different guests, a lot of them from the board game community, and he posts live streams on Twitch where they all play Codenames, carry on, and get messy, and I might be making a guest appearance in the future. And if you don't know of Grant Lyon, I have mentioned him on the channel before. Both him and Tim are actually legit stand-up comedians, but Grant Lyon also posts up a video every month going over upcoming retail games. So if you like these types of videos that I'm making here today, his videos actually pair quite well with mine because I give you all the upcoming campaigns on Kickstarter, but he'll let you know of all the upcoming games going to retail. But if you're the type with a very special sense of humor, I definitely recommend checking out the Dragon's Tome because Jeff puts up a ton of hilarious content. My favorite one is the Jaws of the Lion video, where he does a game unboxing of Jaws of the Lion, and it's 100% accurate and 100% chance to make you laugh. So I do recommend checking that out. If you like the video, definitely subscribe to him. And I really do appreciate each of you allowing me to have a seat at your table and giving me that chance to at least pretend like I'm a comedian. And then there was Alex Radcliffe from BoardGameCo. Yes, he was there, and I did finally get to meet him. I did actually meet him briefly once at Origins Convention, but as I was coming in, he was actually leaving, so it was very brief, and I didn't get to catch up with him after that until now. And this guy is exactly like he is in his videos, and I think I finally kind of figured him out. If I were to take a guess at what exactly is going on inside Alex's head, I would say that he is the type of person that makes his decisions based on whatever is the most fun. I really need to play one of those giant campaign games with Alex where there's branching storylines that change depending on the decisions that you make, because I just want to see him in each of those different situations where he has to make a decision, because I think rather than maximizing his chances of winning, he's going to be maximizing his chances of having fun. And I am 100% okay with that, because even if we lose, we're going out in a blaze of glory. But all jokes aside, Alex was a fantastic host to the event, and he was just working his butt off, making sure that everything went off without a hitch. And he must have done a great job seeing how it all turned out, and he still made time to just play games with anyone that wanted to play games with him. I'm super impressed, and I can't wait until the next one. And along with Alex, I also got to meet Meg, who makes many appearances across his channel, and she also has her own Instagram as well, and she is a total geek and wears it proudly. She was super kind, super spontaneous, and had a sense of humor that rivaled my own. Can't wait to meet you again, Meg. It was a ton of fun. But I did save the best for last, and yes, I am picking favorites here, and everyone else would totally understand, because the last person I want to mention is Devon from Devon Talks Tabletop. I actually did meet Devon before when I went to the Origins convention, and I went to that convention with absolutely no plan or coordination whatsoever, but Devon welcomed me with open arms, and we ended up hanging out quite a bit. Super funny guy, way funnier than me, almost as charming, but he's just the type of person that has your back no matter what. When I was hanging out with Devon at the Origins convention, which was also a fun convention, but the Level Up retreat was way better, hanging out with Devon turned that convention from like a 3 or 4 to me to like an 11. That's the convention where I realized that going to these board game conventions isn't only about staying at the convention, but just hanging out with the people that you meet there, getting food and carrying on, and just having a ton of laughs and fun. And I really do think that that's the thing that made the Level Up retreat so much more fun for me, is that you had the experience of hanging out with your friends while you're at the convention. So it really blended everything together really well. Whereas at other conventions, you'd be surprised how much time you spend just walking around and exploring or having different booths trying to sell you something. Whereas this Level Up retreat was very, very focused on just playing games and having fun and meeting people. And even though I only got to hang out with Devon once before, and it was over a year ago, of course I told him all about my new house purchase and that I just moved to Tavistock, Ontario, where I didn't realize this, but is where crokinole was actually invented. And apparently every year here in Tavistock there is the annual Crokinole World Tournament. And while I was there, Devon actually introduced me to the person who creates the official boards for that tournament, because he happened to be at the event as well, and he had a whole bunch of Crokinole boards out for everyone to play. And I gotta say, these are by far the best Crokinole boards that I've ever seen. And I am Canadian, so I've seen quite a few Crokinole boards in my days, and I gotta say that these ones are on a whole different level. Not only do these boards look amazing, but the discs slide like they're on a air hockey table. It's insane. I'm not the type of guy who says something that I don't mean, and after playing these boards for myself, I'm really confident that these are probably the best crokinole boards that you can find on the market ever. And I may have expressed this subtly while playing crokinole at the Level Up retreat, but Devon noticed and he decided to gift me one as a housewarming gift, so I'm super excited to have something as a constant reminder of Devon. Now I'm having second thoughts. So I hope all of that gives some justification to me picking favorites here, and if it sounds like buying me gifts is the way to my heart, well, it doesn't hurt. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jeremy Tracey himself, who is the one that manufactures these boards. Awesome guy, and he makes all of these boards by hand with his sons in their own shop. And if you are interested in getting a crokinole board for yourself, I highly, highly recommend that you check them out. If you're in the market for a crokinole board and you want the best experience possible, this is the one that you want to check out, and this is a purchase that you will not regret. There's also a bunch of different styles. They all look fantastic, but the one that caught my eye was the gray rock. So if you share the same taste as me, I definitely recommend that you take a look at that one. And you can find all this info at traceyboards.com, but I'll leave a link to this website as well as all the content creators that I just mentioned in the description below. And if you check out just one of these content creators, I would love it if you gave some of Devon's videos some views, show him some support as a thank you from me, and subscribe to his content if you like what he has to offer. But we do have quite a few games launching this week, and I guess that is sort of the purpose of these videos, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have actually launches the day that I'm posting this video, which is July 22nd, and this one's called Burn the Fort, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this one actually has a really interesting theme because there are a ton of board games out there that feature colonial themes, but this one is actually more of an anti-colonial game because you're actually going to be playing as the indigenous tribes, defending your land against the colonizers. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to be playing as their own indigenous warrior, each with their own special abilities, and every player is going to be defending their own land against the invaders. This is a semi-cooperative game because all the players do have a common threat, but each player is trying to defend their own land, and of course, your own land is a little bit more important to you. Each player is going to have a track that leads from their side of the board towards the center of the board, and located at the center of the board is a train on a train track, and every time that a wagon makes it up any of the player's tracks all the way to the center, it's going to move that train one step forward. This is the mechanism that ties all the players together because you don't want any of those wagons to make their way to the center of the board, because if that train reaches the end of the track, then all the players lose. The game does play over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, you're going to be drawing a colonizer card, and then you're going to be resolving its effects. Each player also gets to draw up a hand of cards from their draw deck, and these are going to have a whole bunch of different actions and abilities on them for you to push back the colonizers or modify the board in different ways, and players will be able to play any of these cards as soon as they get into their hand. In addition to playing these cards, each player also gets one action that they can spend to either trade with another player, gift something that they have to another player, or attack any of the wagons out on the board, or to attack the fort, which is the objective of the game. And if you're able to do that, then you have successfully fended off the colonizers. But in order to attack the fort, you're going to be collecting different fire tokens and arrowheads. These arrowheads can be assigned to your own personal player board in order to unlock passive effects, whereas the fire tokens are more like a resource that you'll be spending in order to dish damage. If this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. I have it linked in the description below. And if you follow along, you'll also get a digital soundtrack added to your pledge completely for free. And launching on the 24th, we have Conqueror: The Empire Rises, and this is an expansion to the game Conqueror Final Conquest. This plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 1 to 2 hours to play. And if you are familiar with that original game, this expansion is going to be adding quite a lot to that game. It's going to be introducing faction special abilities, a new type of unit known as an elite unit, and then it's also adding tech trees so you can upgrade your different units and civilians and also the actions that you have available to you. But for those of you that are not familiar with this game, this is an area control game where players are going to be playing as different factions with asymmetrical abilities. And the goal of this game is to be the first player to control and hold 5 forts for an entire round. Each player starts the game controlling their own home territory out on the map, but then the game plays over a series of rounds with an effect card being drawn every round that's going to have game-changing effects that will persist for the duration of that round. At the start of each round, players will also be earning income for the different territories that they control, and then each player is going to have 1 minute to perform all the actions that they want. This means that they can spend that minute to do things like recruit standard and elite units at the different forts that they control, or they can also purchase hero cards that they can use later in combat. After that 1 minute timer ends, players are then going to have the opportunity to bribe their opponent units. And the way that this works is that they're going to have to spend an equal amount of money to the amount of strength that they are trying to bribe. Whenever they do this, they'll be able to take their opponent units off the board and then replace them with their own. And this is the non-aggressive way to take over other players' territories, but of course at the cost of some of your coins. But if you'd rather save your coins, maybe it's the aggressive approach that's more your style. And the way that this works is that each player is going to have an opportunity to activate each of their units, with each of their units performing one action. These actions could be either to move or to attack. When a player chooses to attack, they'll be able to select any of the territories adjacent to the units that they're activating, and then you're simply going to be adding up the strength from the units on each side, including any bonuses for either attacking or defending. And then players will also have the opportunity to add any hero cards that they might have in order to modify the outcome of the battle. The player with the most strength wins the battle, but an interesting mechanism here is that you're actually going to be taking the difference in the strength values, and then the losing player is going to have to remove that many units from the board. If the defending player lost, they also have to flee any of the remaining units to an adjacent territory that they either control or that has still remained neutral. Throughout the game, players will also have the opportunity to place workers out on their own personal player board in order to upgrade either their military or trading strength, and each of the players will also have opportunities to complete different bonus missions that, when you complete them, will give you a nice sum of coins. The game continues like this until one player successfully captures and holds 5 different forts. Then that player wins the game, and if this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out, and I have links in the description below. And now launching on July 25th, we have Innovation Ultimate. And this is actually a campaign that I thought was launching a few weeks back, so I did already film this one. I never actually published it because I saw that the date changed before I put up that video, but I'll just roll that footage for you now, and we can take a little blast to the past to my previous filming location. And this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive card game where players are going to be playing over a series of eras, innovating their own personal tableau as they try to dominate as many eras as possible. And the way that the game's set up is that you're going to have a bunch of numbered decks in a circle out in the middle of the table, with each of those decks representing one of the 10 eras. In the middle of these decks, you're also going to have an equal number of cards so that each era has 1 card associated with it, and whichever player is able to dominate each of those areas is going to be taking that associated card. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to be drawing 2 cards from the first era, choosing 1 to keep in their hand, and then 1 to put down into their tableau in front of them. But something that's interesting about playing these cards is that they do come in 5 different colors, and each color is going to be creating its own stack. This means that you can only have 5 different stacks in front of you, and if you go to play a card of a color that you've already played before, it's going to be going on top of the cards of the same color into that specific stack. The topmost cards on each of these stacks are known as the active cards, but that doesn't mean that the cards underneath them aren't useful, because some of the abilities of these cards could be amplified or even augmented by the cards that you have below them. The game plays over a series of turns, with each player getting 2 actions on their turn. Some of the actions available to you are to draw a new card from one of the Age's deck, but one thing to note here is that each of your active cards are actually going to have a value on them, and you can only draw from the Age that matches the highest value on your active cards. So for example, in this image here, they only have a 3, so that would be their highest value, which means that if they go to draw a card, they have to draw it from the 3rd Age deck. Another action you could perform is to just play one of the cards into your hand, into your tableau, adding it into the appropriate stack or creating a new stack if you haven't started it already. And then you can use another action to activate the effects of one of your active cards. This can help you in all sorts of different ways, but the main thing that you're trying to do here is to gain influence. The reason you want to do that is because influence is the way that you're going to be dominating these different eras. In order to dominate an era, you need to have 5 times as much influence as the era that you're trying to dominate. This means that the first era only costs 5, second era is going to cost 10, the third era is going to cost 15, so on and so forth. And dominating one of the eras is the final action available to you if you do have enough influence. Dominating these different eras is a bit of a race, because each era can only be dominated once, and whoever does that is going to be taking the appropriate card from the center of the table. And also, getting a certain number of dominations is the way that you win the game, so you're trying to be the first player to get that specific number of dominations. But one thing to note here is that the eras aren't the only thing that you're able to dominate, because there are also domain cards. And just like the different eras, there's going to be a bunch of domain cards put out at the start of the game, but the thing that makes these different from dominating the eras is that instead of trying to get a certain amount of influence, instead, you're trying to complete specific objectives. Whoever's able to complete one of those objectives first is going to be acquiring that specific domain card, adding that to their total dominations. I really like this addition to the game because it gives players a bit of flexibility when deciding which cards that they want to go for. The Ultimate Edition is going to be coming with some significant improvements over the original game. The core gameplay is still going to be very much the same, but they did streamline a lot of the rules, especially for the expansions. They've also improved a little bit of the presentation of the different cards. It's also going to be including all the previous expansions and also a brand new one. Definitely looks like a lot of fun, and one that I'm really interested in. I've heard a lot of good things about this game, and just looking into it myself, sounds like a game I would love, so if you think you would like it as well, you can check it out, and I do have links in the description below. Also launching on the 25th, we have Wizards & Co., and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is also my own personal pick of the week. And there's a few reasons for that, but the main thing is that I just think this game looks like a ton of fun, has a lot of things going on and quite a lot of player interaction, and it just plays in only 30 to 60 minutes, so that's a huge win. But what's really impressive is that this is a set collection game, which is one of my least favorite mechanisms, so me picking this as my pick of the week just means that I think they did it really, really well. But this is a competitive game where players are going to be trying to collect gems and artifacts in order to gain different sets for points and also gain different abilities. The game is going to be set up with a few octagon dungeons put out on the table, with each of those dungeons getting 2 random artifacts assigned to them, as well as a random effect. This effect is going to be specific to the dungeon. It's going to affect any of the players that participate in it, so players will want to be aware of how each of these dungeons work whenever they're assigning their cards there. And this is where another really interesting aspect of the game comes into play, because players are going to be taking turns having the opportunity to assign cards to the different dungeons, and whenever you're assigning a card, you can only assign it to the sides of the dungeons that have an opening, and once all those openings are fulfilled, that completes the dungeon, and then that dungeon gets resolved. And players have a few different options when it's their turn to assign cards to the dungeon, because they can actually choose to assign no cards at all, or instead they could choose to assign 1 or 2 cards to one of the valid locations. Each of the cards is going to have a strength value, a creature type, as well as a special ability. And these abilities can do different things like modify, move, or remove cards from that dungeon, and they might only be specific to certain creature types. The interesting thing here is that a lot of them will just affect all creatures of that type. Doesn't matter if it's your cards or your opponent's, so players will want to be aware of this. And when you're assigning any amount of cards to a specific location on a dungeon, you also have the opportunity to place one of those cards face down. This not only prevents your opponents from having additional information of what that card might be, but it also changes the way that that card resolves, because rather than its ability becoming active immediately when it's played, instead it's going to be resolved when that dungeon is resolved. And this is where another really interesting aspect of the game comes into play, because your decisions here will affect how many cards you get to draw in the following round. And as a general rule, if you're doing things like playing more cards or playing one of your cards face down, those are all going to cause you to draw less cards on the following round. And I did mention that you can only assign your cards to the open spaces on the board, so you can't assign cards to where these walls are. But an interesting thing here is that you do have cards that allow you to move the cards within a dungeon. So this might allow you to get to certain locations that you were unable to otherwise. And this game does also have the concept of cursed gems that are all worth -1 victory point at the end of the game. And they also force you to discard one of your good gems. You'll want to be avoiding these at all costs, but that doesn't mean other players might not push you into them. The dungeon gets resolved once all of the open spaces on the dungeon have at least one card assigned to them, and then you're going to be resolving any of those hidden cards, resolving their effects, and then any of the remaining cards, you're going to be adding up the strength for each of the players, comparing the strength, and whoever has the most strength is going to have first pick at one of the artifacts. The artifacts are really nice to have because they can grant you some special abilities, or even give you additional scoring objectives. Once those artifacts are distributed, each of the players are also going to gain the gem that's associated with their card out on the dungeon, and then that dungeon is going to be replaced with a new one. The game continues like this until a set amount of dungeons are completed, and then players are going to be adding up all the victory points, and the player with the most wins the game. And of course, if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I have it linked down below, and you can click to get notified. Also on the 25th, we have an expansion to the game, Nexus Arena Combat, and this new expansion is going to be adding a brand new legacy campaign to that original game. But this new expansion is essentially all encompassed with a single rulebook, because within this rulebook, it's going to offer you all sorts of campaigns and storylines for players to explore. But then also there's portions of the book where you're going to be making different decisions or recording the results of different games that's going to change the way that the game plays moving forward. It doesn't look like you're destroying any components other than this rulebook by playing through this legacy campaign, so if you wanted to record your different results in a separate notebook and just keep this one pristine, that would allow you to reuse this in order to play multiple campaigns. Not only that, but it looks like this new rulebook is going to be including some new ideas and concepts that you'll be able to mix into the original game, and they did also take feedback from their player base, and it looks like they're going to be including some refreshed rules as part of this, with some rules clarifications and small tweaks just to make the game play a little bit better. And this was a game that I thought looked like a ton of fun when it originally launched, so it's nice to see them improving it even more. And if you do want to know how this one plays, I'll go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a head-to-head skirmish game where each player is going to be controlling their own team of gladiators, but these aren't just regular gladiators, these are actually mindless genetic freaks. And each player is going to have some combination of skills across 3 different areas, which is their command, their influence, and their deception. And the command allows players to give their elite gladiators some special abilities, while their influence allows them to access bribes and other nefarious deeds in order to influence cards before the battle. And then your deception allows you to force your opponent into making some poor decisions. And this game also has a really interesting take on combat because it has story-driven combat where the events and cards that you play will create a bit of a story that will make each game unique from the one before. And the game offers a few different arenas to play on, with each one representing a poorly maintained space barge, each with their own hazards that you can take advantage of or avoid, as well as some loot crates to gain some extra weapons. In each round, players are going to be taking turns spending their command points in order to influence their gladiators to make certain actions, but the gladiators do have a mind of their own and they may not always listen. The team with the last gladiator standing is going to win the battle, but the player with the most fame at the end of the game wins the game. And this is a game that's already been released and a game that I think looks like a ton of fun, but this new campaign is going to be offering some new content for the game, and this is going to include pre-painted miniatures, an illustrated novel, as well as inappropriate coins, but the most impressive is the new storage solution. So this is going to offer all sorts of storage trays to store your content, but it also comes with a magnetic frame to hold and keep all your components together. This is a game that I think just looks like a ton of fun, so if you are interested in skirmish games, I definitely recommend checking this one out, and I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 25th, we have Vampire the Masquerade Milan Uprising. This plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative narrative campaign game that does also use the Tubaru smartboard. And if I lost you there and you have no idea what I'm talking about, Tubaru is actually a game system that integrates with a whole bunch of different board games, and it's essentially a smart board where you'll be using your components on that board, and it can do all sorts of different things like keep track of bookkeeping for different decisions, or even do different effects like light up portions of the board, or even do sound effects that add a little bit more immersion to the game. But in this game, players are going to be exploring Milan, which is a city of warring factions. Players are going to be exploring the town in order to gather resources, solve different objectives, and discover the secrets that it has to offer. Each of the obstacles is going to have multiple different outcomes and also have multiple paths to success, so players will want to take advantage of the skills for their specific character in order to try and get the outcome that they want to get. Although characters won't be able to excel in every single skill, players will still have the opportunity to choose which skills they do want to develop, because players will be upgrading their characters throughout the game, and you will have some affordance when deciding how you want to develop your character and decide which skills you want to become more proficient in. Each of the factions explored in the game will each have their own specific goals and ideologies that they are seeking to pursue. And of course, since this game does involve vampires, you can expect that the night is going to be quite a bit different than the daytime. There's not a whole lot more info on how this game plays at the time of filming this video, but they did say that they're going to be posting a bunch more content on the day that it launches. So if this one does sound interesting to you and you want to know more about it, definitely recommend checking it out, and I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 25th, we have the Siblings Trouble Expanded Deluxe Edition. This plays 2 to 5 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this one is a really interesting game that really gives players the opportunity to flex their creativity. The way this game works is that players are going to be each choosing their own characters, each with their own special abilities, and then players are going to be choosing an adventure location. There's a whole bunch of different locations that you can choose from, but you're essentially going to be combining portions of that deck with portions of all the other decks available in the game to create a randomized adventure that's going to be specific to that location, complete with different bosses and secrets, and all the elements you need in order to tell a story. Once you've created that deck, players are going to be taking turns drawing a card from that deck, and that card's going to provide some sort of information to that player. It might provide a little bit of dialogue or narrative, but it could also provide different options or skill tests for the players to try and complete. But there's always going to be some portion that it's going to leave up to the players in order to tell the story. This is really nice because it allows the players to create a story that's specific to them, but each of the cards also provides enough context and details to get your ideas rolling. And as players are taking turns doing all this, there's going to be special cards within that deck that could reveal big secrets as to the ambition of the boss in that deck. And of course, when you get to that boss, players will also be working together to try and defeat it. Players might also find different tokens and items that can help them as they make their way through the deck. And even if it's not your turn, you can use those to help the player whose turn it is. But no matter if you succeed or fail in these different objectives, or even in defeating those final bosses, no matter what, there will always be a story created. So every time you play this game, you're always coming out with a really fun story. And you can always jump back into that location for another adventure with a new randomized deck, which will give you a brand new experience. This new expanded and deluxe version of the game is going to be adding a few new locations, some new characters, as well as new treasure cards and new boss cards. And it's also going to allow some new modes of play, including a way to link different location adventures together into one single giant expanded adventure. This one looks like a ton of fun, especially if you have younger gamers at the table. And if you're interested to check this one out, as always, I do have it linked in the description below. And also launching on the 25th, we have an expansion to the game Factory 42, and this is the Specialists and Golems expansion. If you're not familiar with this game, this is a game that plays 2 to 5 players. It takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play, and this is a competitive game where players are going to be using worker placement in order to compete against each other within a single factory. And I'll explain more on how the game plays in a second here, but first I'll let you know what the new expansion adds to the game. First, it's going to be adding all the components you need for the 6th player. And then it's also going to be adding something known as the Patriot Box, where players will be rewarded for reporting illegal activity within the plant, because in this game you do have the opportunity to work with the black market. It's also going to be adding a calendar clerk, which is going to modify event cards within the game. It's also introducing 2 new types of workers. There's the specialists, which don't have to wait in line and have a little more freedom than the other workers within the plant. And then there are also the Golems, which are highly efficient workers and do a great job for a specific task, but they will only work on that one specific task until a supervisor moves them to a new one. But I did cover the original campaign back when it launched previously, and I did a pretty thorough job explaining how the game plays, so if you do want to know more, I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now, and of course you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. And the first campaign we have launches on February 28th, and this is going to be a reprint for Factory 42. And this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a Euro-style game that uses primarily resource management and worker placement, and it also makes interesting use of a cube tower. And the whole concept of this game is that players are foremen within the Factory 42, and you're trying to manage your workers in order to fulfill orders for your government. The catch here is that your government is also an authoritarian government and has some strict rules and bureaucracy that you're going to have to deal with, and if you're not always able to get what you want, you might want to also engage in some shady deals. And there are a few really interesting aspects of this game. The first is that there is a lot of player interaction. Since all the players are operating within the same manufacturing facility, everything another player does is really important to you when you're trying to decide what you want to do on your turn. Players are going to be moving around different rail cars, generating resources, and you're going to want to pay attention to what the other players are doing. On top of that, each action space does also have a secondary action that only one player can perform in each action space, and it's going to be augmented by the number of players that perform the standard action in that space. So that's just another way that you want to anticipate or take advantage of what the other players are doing. And the other really interesting aspect of this game is the way that the resources, cube tower, and bureaucracy all work in this game. Players are going to be gaining their resources through the cube tower, but the cube tower also represents bureaucracy because certain cubes that go in may not be the same cubes that come out. There are a few multi-level chambers within the cube tower, so as you put your cubes in, some might sit in different areas and not come out right away. So even though you see exactly what goes into the cube tower, you may not see those cubes that went in up to a few turns later, and you will see cubes that were put in on previous turns. Players will be trying to funnel these resources into different rail cars to move them into different manufacturing zones, but players can also use these resources to burn to generate steam. So there are a couple purposes for the resources, and you're going to want to optimize that to try and put yourself in the best position while trying to hinder your opponents. And the game's played over 6 rounds, and there's 4 phases each round. In the first phase, players are going to be drawing an event card, and that's going to have a game-changing effect that will affect all the players. Players will also then draw invention and order cards. The order cards dictate what combination of resources are required to generate different levels of a product to fulfill that order, and the invention cards will allow for special abilities for the different players throughout the game if they choose to play an action to activate it. The second phase is the worker phase, where players will be putting their workers out onto the main board, and players will be putting these workers into these spaces to perform different actions. And those actions can be things like extending your warehouse, gaining new resources, loading rail cars, moving those rail cars into individual player boards, generating steam to convert those resources into products, triggering abilities on their invention cards, or researching new upgrades for their player board. And when you are moving around and loading rail cards, you really want to be aware of what your opponents are doing, because anyone can move a rail card to any other player's personal player board, and that can help or hinder you depending on the opportunities on the table and what that player is attempting to do. Luckily, actions are not actually executed until the following turn, so you can start to see what the other players are trying to do as you're putting your workers out. And then on the third phase, those actions are actually going to get executed in a particular order that is outlined on the board. Once all the actions have been executed, players will get bonus points for fulfilling different orders, and there will also be bonus points to the players that were able to fulfill the most orders. The fourth phase is the cleanup phase, and then the rounds repeat, and after 6 rounds, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And I did mention that this is a reprint, so there are some changes that are going to be coming along with it. For the most part, the game plays exactly the same, but they did make some improvements to the iconography. This was a big area of contention in their previous release, so they did listen to their audience, and they did improve that iconography so that the game is much more easy to play. And the biggest change that this campaign is offering is that there will be a black market mini expansion, which is going to add some other ways for players to fulfill orders. players. And of course, there will be some upgrades and stretch goals that players will unlock throughout the campaign, so you can look forward to that as well. And now launching on the 26th, we have The Gods Will Have Blood, and this is a solo game that takes just 15 to 30 minutes to play. And in this game, you're trying to raise your reputation as a magistrate as you see over the trials of the accused. In order to play this game, you're going to be drawing the different cards of the accused, reading their case, and then using that information to deduce the appropriate verdict. It's up to you to decide which of these accused you set free and which you sentence to death. Of course, the accuracy of your verdict is going to determine your reputation, and it could either strengthen or put into question your legitimacy. But this game is not as simple as just making the most appropriate verdict, because you may not be completely impartial and you might have personal scores to settle or rivals to discredit, or even dear friends show up in court that you do not want to see sentenced to death. This means that your personal desires and goals might get in the way of some of your verdicts, and it's going to be up to you to weigh the pros and cons of sacrificing some of your reputation in order to see an outcome that you desire. But the game continues like this, and if you are interested in elevating your reputation while potentially getting rid of some of those rivals that might stand in your way, you'll definitely want to check this one out, and I'll have it linked in the description below. And on the 27th, we have the game I Felt, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 10 to 40 minutes to play. And this one is a party game where players are going to be taking on different roles. There's always going to be one player acting as the judge, and you can kind of think of this player as the active player. If it's your turn to play as the judge, then it's your role to draw one of the feeling cards. Then you're going to look at what feeling is depicted on that card, and you're going to be telling an associated story that you relate to that feeling. All the other players are going to be listening, and then they're going to be trying to guess which feeling you drew based on the story that you told. But there's always going to be one player in that group acting as their representative. Of course, different people can have different feelings associated with different scenarios, so it does take some understanding of the person in order to try and come out with the appropriate guess. All the different feelings that are available within the game are going to be available in a grid on the table, and then all those guessing players are going to simultaneously point at which feeling they think that story is associated with. This allows players to gauge how in line they are with each other, but it also sets a precedence as to where everyone is at the beginning of the guessing. And if you're not all aligned, you don't have to worry too much, because there is a 3-minute period where all the players will be able to ask the judge any questions that they like. And then after that 3 minutes is over, they will discuss with the representative in order to determine that final answer. And the judge will reveal whether or not they selected the appropriate emotion. All the players guessing will gain a victory point for making an accurate assessment. And then each round you're going to be alternating which player plays as the judge. And once all players have had a turn, that triggers the end of the game. And the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I have it linked in the description below. And launching on the 28th, we have Mind Expedition, and this is a campaign that I thought was launching a couple weeks ago, but it got pushed back until now, so I did already cover this one. And I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this one is actually designed to be a condensed D&D experience that doesn't take a whole evening to play. In this game, each player is going to be controlling their own character, and then during a turn, you're going to be moving your character along the board, trying to complete your specific character quests, and then you're going to be drawing a terrain card depending on where you stop. The terrain card could present different opponents or situations that the player must have to deal with. Then there's going to be several endings, and the one that is the eventual outcome is going to be depending on the monster's strength, the player's gear, and passive skills and extra abilities chosen at the beginning of the game. But it's not all entirely up to that, because there is also the aspect of the game master. But what's really interesting about this game is that there is no specific one player acting as the game master. Instead, each player is going to be taking their turns individually, and then all the other players will be filling in as the game master for that player's turn. The active player is going to be letting the other player know their decisions, which items they're going to be using, and if they need to roll dice, the outcome of those dice rolls. Then it's up to the other players to evaluate how successful that player was. This, of course, is going to give a lot more opportunity for freedom and creativity as the players are playing the game, allowing to create more varied stories and outcomes that will make each game feel very different from the last. And if you're interested in this one, you can check it out. I have links in the description below. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still have an awesome giveaway to announce. And this giveaway is going to be a little bit special because it's actually my birthday next week, so I want to do something a little bit different. And since I've been moving over the past week, I've been forced to go through my whole game collection. There's actually quite a few games that I either have duplicates of or that I just don't play very much, and they're all excellent games. I just think they would be more excellent at someone else's house where they'll get played more. And I'm still going through all the games, so I don't have the complete list yet, but I'll pull that all together and have it ready for next week. And then whoever wins this giveaway is going to have first dibs on one of those games. And then I'll do a follow-up draw to give away each of the remaining games. And as always, these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you have to do is leave a comment. You don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe or do any of that. But rather than commenting on one of my videos, I'm actually going to send you over to the board game garden because Jenna was awesome to travel with to the Level Up retreat, and who knows where I would have ended up on my own, so you have her to thank that I made it back in one piece. I'll leave a pinned comment down below to her channel, as well as the video that I want you to comment on. And the video that I'm going to be drawing the comments from is, of course, her vlog that she just posted up covering the Level Up retreat. Rather than just slacking off like me, she was filming during the Level Up retreat and then doing work actively to put this video together. So I really do appreciate all the effort she put into it, and you can leave any comment that you like, but if you're looking for a suggestion, maybe let her know your favorite part of that vlog. And of course, feel free to check out her other content as well. She offers a whole bunch of different videos like top 10 lists, reviews, and even more lifestyle videos like these vlogs. And if you do like her content, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on what she has in the future. And that's everything I have for you this week, and I should probably unpack my bed and maybe get some sleep. So as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.